Francis of Assisi is everybody's favorite saint. One of the things that makes him so popular is his special love for creation, for nature, especially for the animals. That's why every year on his feast day, many churches will invite people to bring their pets into the church, actually into the church building itself, for a special blessing of the animals service, despite how chaotic and even messy that can get. In pictures, Francis is frequently depicted surrounded by the animals, tenderly caring for them. There are even stories of Francis being able to communicate with the animals, to talk to them in a language they can understand. In one famous story that I've heard over and over again throughout the years, Francis comes across this ferocious lion and is able to tame him through his calming words. And then he befriends this lion. It's that image of Francis peacefully coexisting with the wild beast that so endears us to him. But as enchanting as this image is, and as much as I wish it were true, these stories of Francis taming the wild beast are pure legend. They never happened. They're simply myths that are built up around his special love for creation, especially the animals, that special love he had for them in his spirituality. After his death, these stories simply developed based on this special love and emphasis of his. But like Francis taming the wild beasts, couldn't Jesus' resurrection simply be a legend? Like Francis, couldn't Jesus' resurrection simply be a story that developed long after his death based on the profound impact he had on his disciples, especially the special relationship with God that he exhibited in his spirituality? That's a question somebody recently asked, and they put it in a most compelling and unique way. Here's how they framed it. They said, it's reasonable enough to imagine that based on the profound impression Jesus had on them, that Jesus' disciples, after his death, continued to meet in groups to talk about his ideas and his sayings and his legacy. And then it's also reasonable enough to imagine that at some point they might have heard that his body went missing from its tomb. And then not long after that, it's reasonable to imagine that at least some of his disciples might have had vivid dreams, even visions of him appearing alive from the dead. Given his special relationship with God, the impression he had made on them about that special relationship he had with God, it's the most natural thing for these disciples to believe is that God had vindicated him. With his body missing, the most natural thing for them to believe is that God had vindicated him by assuming him into heaven, kind of like the Old Testament prophet Elijah, just bringing his body right away after death into heaven. And then it's only long after, 30 to 60 years later, when the gospel writers first put pen to papyrus, that anybody ever claims that Jesus had physically resurrected. In other words, it's only much later, as this legend grows, that anybody claims that Jesus actually appeared to his disciples bodily risen from the dead. I know that this question can seem terribly irrelevant and abstract. So why bother with it? Well, here's why. Among those scholars who study the resurrection, and especially among those who don't believe that Jesus actually rose from the dead, they don't believe it's a miracle, this is the most popular explanation by far that they offer for the evidence that virtually no one can deny. Every scholar who studies the resurrection accepts certain kind of bedrock facts and then try to explain those facts. And if they don't explain it as an actual resurrection, as an actual miracle, this is the most popular way by far that scholars go in terms of explaining what actually happened. They say that given the profound impact Jesus had on his disciples, given the unusual circumstances around his death, and given the fact that the Gospels weren't written until much later, 30 to 60 years later, the time delay, that the best way to explain these facts, this evidence, is that it's a legend which developed over time. And here's why this really matters. If they're right, if Jesus isn't really resurrected from the dead, if the whole thing is simply a legend, then we have no real hope. All we have is wishful thinking in the face of COVID or anything else. The only solid hope we can have, the only solid hope we can cling to is if Jesus really rose from the dead. It's his conquering death that gives us any solid hope that there can be some kind of greater ultimate good that he can bring out of this suffering, the pandemic, or anything else, any other suffering that we experience. Nothing more, in other words, nothing more could be at stake than answering this question, whether or not Jesus' resurrection is a legend or not. But take heart. There are a number of powerful responses to this explanation, this alternative, most popular alternative explanation to the resurrection, this legend theory. There are a number of powerful responses that give us every reason to hope, every reason to believe that Jesus' resurrection isn't just a legend. And over the next several blogs, I'll share some of those powerful responses with you. But before I do, I'd love to hear your response to this objection. Do you believe that Jesus' resurrection is just a legend? Or if you don't believe it's a legend, if you believe that he really rose from the dead, that it's a miracle, how would you respond to this explanation, to this objection, this legend theory? You can go to the Contact EJ page of the Raising Jesus website and leave your comments there. I'd love to hear what you think about this topic.